Hey everybody, welcome back to Drew the Catholic. Today we have a very special guest. I have to confront this particular Jesuit wearing camouflage that I found, because I found out today that he is bi ritual. So we're going to talk to Father John Brown. Father John, how are you?
I'm feeling very bi-ritual.
It's the worst. I saw your community post the other day about this. And I was like, if you couldn't have been any cooler, this is how you became cooler. You were already like one of the coolest Catholic YouTubers. And then I saw you vested for the Eastern Rite. And I was like, who is this guy, man? You're doing everything. So that was really cool to see.
I wasn't even wearing the fancy hat for the name of which I can't even remember. But as a bi-ritual priest, so because I'm a Jesuit and I have vows, the closest analogous thing to the East would be a monk, and so there's another kind of hat that you can wear that has like the sides and the back that's kind of divided into three, this veil kind of thing. And I wasn't even wearing the veil, and I still look cool. So that's pretty great.
It was awesome. The Eastern vestments they're just cool. Western vestments can be cool too, but there's something about they're just ornate, and I like that. I like the hats that like the archpriests or the bishops wear. My wife is on it. She says the camo is good. The camo is too good.
Yeah.
He was cold. You said you were cold, right? It's cold in there. That's the same. I'm wearing a jacket too.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, it's colder than I expected it to be. Down here in Louisiana, we really don't get very harsh winters, but it's a little chilly today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you hunt?
I do. Yeah,
nice.
I do. When I get a chance, I say I do. I mean, the truth is, it's been a very long time since I had the opportunity to do it. I grew up on a farm, hunting and fishing a lot, and so I very much enjoy it. I don't get away from my work a whole lot, but when I do, that's what I like to do.
Do you fly fish? That's the question. Have you ever fly fished?
No, no, I've never tried
so
fly
good.
fishing. We don't have like a lot of brooks in Louisiana.
Oh, that makes sense. You got some swampy stuff probably more than anything.
Right. We have a lot of swamp. We have a lot of swampy stuff.
That
right. So good bass fishing, or if you like me, cat fishing, that kind of thing.
Oh, there you go. Do you have you seen the people? You probably have that. I think it's called catfish noodling, where they like use their hands, grab them out.
Sure.
Yeah, I came across that on YouTube, and I was like, "This is awesome." Seems pretty intense, though. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, Father, it's so good to have you on. I feel like this has been a long time coming because we keep interacting back and forth and watching each other's content, and I really like watching yours. And for whatever reason, you seem to be interested in mine, which I
definitely
have no idea why. Where it's mostly just memes But
it started off as kind of a penance, and I was like, I should put myself through this for the poor souls in purgatory, and eventually it grew on me. So
man, good. Yeah, it's like Stockholm syndrome, right?
Right.
Oh man, That's so funny. Well, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that most people who are going to watch this are probably already subscribed to both of our channels, because it seems like we have a lot of overlap in some of the things we talk about and audience and things like that. But for anyone watching who doesn't know who you are, maybe just get a brief background on who you are and what you do.
I mean, I hope there's a lot of overlap. I think you attract a good class of people, so that's good. So I hope there's a lot of overlap. But my name is Father John Brown. I am a Jesuit priest. I joined the Jesuits in 2000. I am the president of a Jesuit high school in New Orleans. We sometimes refer to it as the Jesuit high school. It's such a good, like you're a Drew, the Catholic. I work at Jesuit at the Jesuit high school. There are like 50 something Jesuit high schools in the country, but I'm at the Jesuit high school in New Orleans. It's a 175-year-old high school, so it's a pretty great place.
Oh wow!
And so. I also say Mass around town, a couple of different places. You refer to me as bi-ritual, which is true. I say Mass at Immaculate Conception here in town, often on Barone Street, and then also at the Ruthenian Byzantine Catholic Church on Carrollton Street, St. Nicholas of Myra.
That's super cool. So does that ever get like tricky? Because you're probably so used to saying the Latin rite, and then you're saying the Eastern rite, and you have to catch yourself like doing something that's the wrong rubric, maybe. Or
and the words are just a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
So every now and then there'll be some weird words, and it's So it has been a transition, but I got to tell you, it's really breathed in a weird way. I didn't expect it to happen, but it's breathed some life into my sort of like sacramental ministry here. That it makes me feel like a brand new priest all over again. I've only been doing the Byzantine rite for a short time, so for just a few months now, and it's really awakened something in me that maybe I had gotten just a little bit complacent with in the Roman rite. So yeah.
I just had the pleasure of attending my first Divine Liturgy when I was visiting Kyle in Steubenville. It was Melkite. It was a Melkite liturgy. And it was cool. And like, it's so funny because I knew that it was leavened host. But when I received the Eucharist, I was like, "What is happening?" It was so different,
What
you know.
they use tongs in the milkite, right?
He
Are they
just used his
using tongs?
hands. Yeah, he was just dipping it right
Oh,
in
okay.
the chalice and
We
then hand feeding you
yeah,
basically.
we use a spoon, so like I have to take a
Oh,
spoon
okay.
and uh, you know, nobody like closes their mouth on the spoon, so you have to kind of like you
Yeah,
have to be
like
ready for it to come.
okay.
You have to be ready for it to be airborne for a second, you know.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's so cool. Well, what just kind of a little bit of background. So you've been a Jesuit since you said you joined in 2000?
I joined in August of 2000, right? August 15th of
Nice.
2000.
Maybe give us a little history. What led you to, first I guess discern the priesthood and then specifically the Jesuit order? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Sure. So I grew up on a rice and crawfish farm in Louisiana, down where
That's
I'm at
so
now,
cool.
which is pretty odd for a Jesuit to be in the same place or near the same place. I guess I'm about 2.5 hour drive away. For a Jesuit to be in the same place where he grew up is kind of rare. So I'm just lucky that way that I'm living close to home. But I grew up on this rice and crawfish farm. Moved out to Houston, Texas, and worked as a website developer for a few years. And then when I was 23, 24 years old, started thinking about, what I was spending all my time doing and whether that was for God's greater glory or not. And I didn't know it at the time, but I think I was already beginning to think like a Jesuit that way. Felt a little bit of emptiness in the worldly pursuits that I was spending so much time on. So, began to ask God, what do you want from me? Like I'll do whatever you want, and kind of started in my prayer. I remember this is kind of a primitive way of praying, but I remember just like offering God these different professions. Like, God, do you want me to go back to school and, do you want to go back to school and become a helicopter pilot to drop off bags of rice to poor people after a flood or whatever? What do you want me to do? And I kind of went through all these different jobs. And I remember eventually I got like, do you want to be a priest? I'm sure you don't. I mean, like I had a girlfriend at the time. I was like, I'm sure you don't want me to be a priest, but I'll offer that to you anyway. And I remember waking up the next morning feeling like, oh my God, what have I done? Maybe I took this a little too far, with this offering. And so, yeah. And then from then on, I looked around a little bit, talked to some Dominicans, talked to some like Legionaries of Christ, talked to some Benedictines. But really, the thing that kind of kept popping up for me, it was really Saint Ignatius Loyola, the Jesuit saints. So many of them had been, so many of the saints had been converts, or let's say wayward Catholics that came back and were able to use whatever skills they had gotten in the world, that they had been using maybe for ill, and then turn around and offer them to God and to be able to do great things for them. And so many of them had become fervent. As good Jesuit missionaries, and all that stuff just really excited me. And so I joined the Jesuits, like I said, in 2000. They've had me all over the place. And I guess for the past 11 or 12 years, I've been in New Orleans, minus 1 year. 1 year in the middle of all that. Back in 2017, I went and spent a year doing what the Jesuits call tertianship. So I spent that in Ireland and Iraq for a little while. And then they sent me right back to New Orleans. So I don't think it's like I got the feeling nobody else wants me. So they sent me back to the same assignment I had before. So here I am. Yeah.
No complaints though. Close to home. That's probably pretty nice. Yeah. Oh man.
Well, I mean, I like my job so much. I try to do these things every now and then that won't get me fired from my job, but also will make sure I never get hired somewhere else. So for example, every now and then this possum will wander onto campus and try to like eat in the garbage or whatever. So I'll go grab it by the tail and make sure lots of people take pictures of me doing this. So
because we don't want this guy doing this somewhere else. Yeah.
No, like nobody else is going to hire me once I do this, but they're not going to fire me. The job I'm at, so it's a great job. It makes sure that I'm planted where I'm at. So.
I will say, like, one thing I appreciate just watching you from afar and seeing you and hearing your your stories and hearing your sermons. You do so much. Like, you're active. Yeah. You're a busy guy. So how do you
try to stay that way? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess obviously in any sort of vocation to the priesthood, that's a good thing to be, because it you have the time to commit to that and stuff. But I mean, your output with all you're involved with the school, you say mass at these different parishes, you're doing YouTube. Yeah. Like what's your, I mean, just as someone who should be a high output person for the sake of things I'm doing, what What drives that? What makes you
Well,
hold all
I
that
mean, to be
together?
honest, I mean, so part of that has got to come from some of the freedom that I have in being a
Mhm.
celibate priest, right?
Mhm.
So I know that being a married man with children is just going to mean you're going to have a certain set of priorities that, certain things in your life are going to become like a means to an end, and they don't
Mhm.
always cross over for each other. For myself, I just kind of see everything as part of my mission, part of
Mhm.
my ministry to the world. And so, if what I try to do a lot is to duplicate the work that I do, or double dip with the work that I do, right? So if I write a homily, I'll turn around and make a YouTube video out of it, or I'll try to say mass at 2 or 3 parish churches on any given Sunday, so that way I can say the same homily 2 or 3 times, that
There
sort
you
of thing.
go.
So that's helpful. I use a lot of what I used to when I was in the classroom. So I use a lot of the examples and the stories I get from the classroom whenever I preach. So it keeps me. Yeah, it keeps me doing a lot of different things. It was kind of like that growing up, right? So I grew up on a farm where you kind of have to wear a lot of different hats on a farm. Everybody learns a little bit of carpentry, a little bit of mechanic work, a little bit of
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff. So I guess
Jack of all
that whole
trades, yeah.
mindset, yeah, that mindset, I think maybe stuck with me some, right?
Mhm. No, I think that's
Keeps me
really
busy.
good. I think that's really good because then you're, you know, the same message is impacting people in so many different places. Like you had mentioned, starting your YouTube channel,
Yeah.
even you were thinking originally it was going to be for people connected to the school and your community, and now it's kind of it's people not in that sphere at all, but they're getting the same
Mhm.
impact of some of the
Yeah.
thoughts and the things you're discerning in your ministry and your in your real life non-digital vocation.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly
Which is
right. Every
good.
now and then I'll run into somebody and they'll say, "Hey, I saw you on Michael Lofton's channel." So I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, they don't even know that I'm a big deal on YouTube on my own channel." You know.
Yeah, no, I love your little homily videos. I mean, they're like the perfect length. They're not ever usually too long. You can listen to them in one sitting, and
Right.
it's a good
Right.
little start to the day or end to the day or whatever.
Yeah.
And only
Right.
sometimes are they
Strange.
related to the craziness of the world. A lot of times it's like, oh, a place to rest and not get caught up in the
Yeah.
whatever's
Yeah.
going on. But
Yeah, or even if I do relate it to any kind of current event, it's usually like some spiritual good. I try to make it
right.
about some spiritual good that would be good, even if you're watching this 6 months from now, when
Mhm.
there's when everybody's thinking about something else. So I definitely try not to make it like current events, but I try to make it something that's kind of like evergreen spirituality,
Mm.
even if it's the thing I think people need to hear right now about something that might be happening currently.
No, that's wise too. And then that content has a longer shelf life too. So even just for like a purely like channel growth perspective, that's the right way to do it. Because it's easier to grow. We talked about this before the stream. It's really easy to grow if you're just constantly reacting, constantly hot take. Whatever is most relevant.
Yeah.
But I think that can be a dangerous kind of bend to go down.
100%, right? 100%. Well, first of all, I hope that people don't consume that kind of content too often.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like the world doesn't need, like we've already got a handful of guys who are so good at what they do that I don't feel like they need one more voice,
Mm-hmm.
doing so, if you want to hear, ex trads talking about whatever, like that's out there. Dom's
Mm-hmm.
got it right or whatever, or
Yeah.
Michael Lofton's got the ecclesiology stuff so wrapped up tight, and it's great. I don't think anybody needs to hear me say that.
Mm-hmm.
So really rather spend some time thinking about the gospel, thinking about the readings, thinking about the liturgy. Every now and then some Ignatian spirituality that I think people could use. So I try to keep my content that way.
No, that's really good, and I mean that makes sense. Given that you're a Jesuit and that you have that formation, you have that depth. I've really started appreciating Saint Ignatius a lot more. I read, I'm trying. Of course, now I'm gonna forget what the book title was, but there was some 40-day. I think it was 40 days to a whole life confession or something, and it was kind of a walk through Ignatius's life and his sort of spiritual awakening and conversion and stuff, and then had you do similar things to really get to the depth of your sinfulness, but then wake up to how much God loves you and
Yeah.
things like that. But can you kind of walk through that in a nutshell? What is Ignatian spirituality? What's Ignatius all about? And just
Well,
like a nutshell.
sure. So Ignatian spirituality is really just good, solid Catholic spirituality, but organized and summed up and synthesized by Saint Ignatius Loyola. It's often referring to the way that somebody might go on a retreat, right? So how you might go through these spiritual exercises, meaning like these drills that you'll put yourself through during a retreat to
Mm-hmm.
maybe help you. But it's also got a lot of parts that you can use in everyday life when you're not on retreat, and ways of looking at the world when you're not necessarily on retreat that might be helpful. So it's not a lot of brand new stuff. It's just very well organized and synthesized and put in an order that helps bring you from point A to point B. And like a lot of exercises, you kind of need to have a plan, and you need to stick to that plan, especially when the going gets rough. And so I think that's why so many people are attracted to Ignatian spirituality, is because it's so structured, and it's I think it makes you ready for mystical experiences, but it also doesn't like rely on mystical experiences. It relies on good, solid reasoning, a good, solid understanding of Scripture and of doctrine. And so I think that's why a lot of people like it.
Yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, like I said, I've just been diving into it just a little bit with this book that my priest gave to me. And when he said mystical experiences, absolutely was my experience. I was not ready to be floored like that, because it was having me reflect on my life and go through, some of my attachments and some of the disordered ways of thinking I have, and like really discern what those are really about, and then surrender them, and kind of get caught up in the whole story of the gospel. And it was just a lot of contemplative prayer. And then I just found myself like feeling like God was really speaking to me, like not like voice from heaven, but like very direct, very clear. And I was just like, hold on now, what is going on? What did you make me do?
I wish everybody knew this. Like, I really do wish everybody knew this. I mean, if there is one thing, I said Ignatius, there's nothing really new there, but he's coming from the viewpoint of a great sinner who wants to become a saint. And I think that a lot of people can relate to that in a way that some saints, when they write, I mean, they're these great, you're reading about the holy experience of this other person who's a saint. Whereas whenever you're working with Saint Ignatius, I feel like he's talking to me, and he's more in touch with my own personal experience, that's where the healing has to happen. And so, as inspired as I can be by lots of other saints and their writings, Saint Ignatius he's got work to do, and he's helping get that work done with the help of the Holy Spirit to really transform a person's life who's practicing this kind of spirituality.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I think it's really good. I know one of the big things that just like when you're a Catholic dude, especially new to the faith, and you don't know I didn't know all these saints and all these orders and stuff. One of the big things that I remember talking about in like my more charismatic days was like discerning the will of God and discernment. That seems to be a big thing with Ignatius too, is like discernment and how to discern if you're called to this or that. Maybe it's vocational, maybe it's just like your next step. What's his process there? What's the process of like Ignatian discernment, or like sort of the Jesuit process of discernment? Because I feel like I see that term a lot, like Ignatius's steps of discernment, or his writings on it and stuff. So it seems like he talks about it.
Couple of big themes that you're going to pick up on is one is it's teleological, right? So it begins with recognizing yourself as a creature, something created by God the Creator, and designed for something. Like, God has an end in mind when he created you. He has a goal in mind when he created you. And there's a way in which you are more yourself when you live according to what God made you for, right? So he uses that as a jumping off point for judging everything else in the world. So rather than, for example, saying, here are the 10 things you shouldn't do, and here's the 10 things you must do, instead it's more along the lines of, hey, things can be good or bad in degrees, and you judge that degree by some things are bad all the time, not by a degree or anything like that. But even for the good things, you can't say, oh, well, this isn't a sin, therefore I'm free to do it. We should instead be saying, to what degree should I do this? And I judge that by to what degree it helps me become the person God made me to be. And so that teleological approach is so ever present. It's part of the reason why I love it is that it's hard when you are discerning the spirits, when you are figuring out which ways I'm being pulled or pushed, because facts don't care about your feelings. I know that, but like your feelings do matter to you, right? Your feelings do. Yeah. Your feelings make you often make decisions based out of your feelings, whether you like it or not. And so this helps you judge those feelings and accept the ones that are good and push away the ones that are bad, because some feelings are coming from the good spirit, from God, and some feelings are coming from the evil spirit, right? And so to be able to discern those spirits and figure out which ones are pulling me and pushing me and who should I be listening to, it'll go back to that kind of teleological approach at how you view your life. And then there's just a ton of like really good, I guess you can call them nuggets of like, you get to see how is it that the evil spirit typically acts on a person. how is it that the evil spirit finds its way to get into my life even when he's not welcome here, yet I keep finding him here, right? And so St. Ignatius has a lot of great insights as to exactly how some of these things come about, and it seems like every single time he's right. So I can't deny the wisdom. I've been a practitioner of this now for 23 years. So this is it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful, and I mean that was a big thing. I spent a lot of time doing that. Now I need to read more of St. Ignatius and see if some of the things I've learned are lining up. I'm sure he's found it all before. It's like every time you think you have a new idea, you read some saint that thought of it way first, right? But just I've learned to and that book really helped me parse out the thoughts that arise in my heart. Like some of them are clearly just me. Some of them are, like you said, definitely not a great influence. And then some of them seem to arise naturally in my heart, but they're more like, I didn't think of that on my own, and that can be an indicator, at least one indicator, maybe that's something God is pushing me towards. But then, learning how to and it's kind of trial and error in a way, right? At least in my experience. At first you're I don't know if I'm hearing anything or if I'm just making this all up or if I'm just, this is convenient for me.
No, I think, part of it is going to be that St. Ignatius was so hardcore in his own life, right? He was so, he's just so hardcore. I don't know a better word for it. That it definitely, if you're well, maybe God just wants me to take it easy. Maybe God was usually it's you'd better be, St. Ignatius is going to be watch out for that, right? That's probably the evil spirit. It's not necessarily the evil spirit. Necessarily, but if you think the easier way is the way God wants you to go, it just doesn't look a lot like Jesus. So let's spend some time with the Gospels and watch how the apostles were always holding back, and Jesus constantly calling him, saying, "Come and follow me, closer, closer, and closer, and pick up your cross and follow me." All that kind of stuff, I think, is just a great way to look at our own spiritual lives. And it's also helped me to be a good priest, outward focused as well. And I think it helps other people be a better Christian towards their neighbor, right? Because a lot of times what will happen is that we get so, we understand theology so well, right? We understand the structures, the scaffolding that everything hangs off of. We get all of that. And we forget to ask, when somebody has a question, we forget to ask them, well, why do you have that question? I find myself doing this all the time, and it sounds like some weird Jesuit mind trick where somebody will come and they have a theological question, and before I give them the answer, which might be super simple, or I might have to go and look this up later, but my first question is usually, well, why do you have that question? What's got you interested in this? Is it and often that's where the real ministry can happen. It helps in the confessional, right? When people come in and confess a certain sin, rather than me saying, well, that's a sin because it's both a sacrilege and the ends for which marriage was created is blah, blah, blah. Instead, I'll say something it helps. It gives, let's just put it that way. It gives me insights. It helps me with insights as to into sin and how to get somebody to overcome that sin. As much as it's helped me personally, it helps with my neighbor as well.
I think that's really good, though. That's a good method because, I mean, the first thing I think of as, I loved studying, a big part of my journey was studying the Jewish roots of the New Testament. That sounds very rabbinical in its methodology, right? A lot of the ways that even Jesus talks is sort of rabbinical in that it's getting you to ask the right questions or looking at the thing behind the thing and trying to dig deeper, it's not just a thing on the surface. Right. Yeah. So
right. And you can see, and you can see the downside to this, what you call rabbinical way of thinking too, where often it's we know the law, and so maybe we can find a way to be a little attorney here and figure out a way in which I can trap you in your words. And you can see the dark side of that way of thinking. And then you see Jesus, the perfect rabbi who's got the answer that both exposes how dumb the question is or how bad the question is or whatever, and at the same time opens your mind to saying oh, I get it now. Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thing.
Man, that's really awesome. You probably saw me smirking throughout that. It's because I shouldn't look at the comments while I'm talking to you. Because David Stepina, if you know, is he in your channel at all? Interacting with you?
Yeah, once in a while I see him in different chats. Sure.
He's so funny. Someone asked, and this is probably a serious question: Could Father Brown explain the differences between Catholics and Orthodox? To which David immediately said, "Can Father explain the key differences between Jesuits and Catholics?"
Oh, very funny. David. My ribs are hurting.
Poking the bear, man.
No, I mean, listen, Why do people think this sometimes? Why do they have these questions? Well, I would put anybody that's, that I guess in the context here is there's a 500-year history, more or less, 500-year history of the Jesuits being on the wrong side of the powerful bad people, right? I know that's going to sound okay. It sounds like I'm sticking it for the Jesuits, and I kind of am, but there is a long history. I mean, who were the first ones to really hate the Jesuits? Well, it was those who the Protestants hated the Jesuits, right? Absolutely hated the Jesuits. The Inquisition hated the Jesuits because the Jesuits were, the Inquisition was about, do you believe all the right things? And then the Jesuits were very popular because people were flocking to them because they cared about people's souls as much as they cared about what they believed in. And the Jesuits were always, there were no heretics in the early Jesuits or anything like that. The next people to hate them were the Franciscans hated them in the mission territory because the Jesuits made a lot more headway in mission territory in most cases. The Jesuits were hated by the slave traders in South America because they were helping the poor indigenous people there. The Jesuits were hated really just because they were, I hate to. It sounds like I'm bragging about the Jesuits, but I kind of am. But they were, talking about really, really smart, talented people at some really weird times in the church, and it just got a lot of and powerful. Also, the Jesuits became pretty powerful too. Now, much more recently, you see the Jesuits kind of the tip of the thinking spear during Vatican II, right? So a lot of that ressourcement stuff, you had some very influential, it wasn't only Jesuits, of course, but a lot of the Jesuits, there were a lot of Jesuits in those circles. And, so if you don't like the kind of Vatican II stuff, the spirit of Vatican II stuff, especially, and look, count me in on believing that the church just has a lot of work to do. And I'm not like pretending we're in a great place or anything like that, but there were a lot of Jesuit theologians who were in the middle of that stuff. And the truth is, most people who hate the Jesuits for that reason, most of them have a hard time reading 2 or 3 paragraphs out of Karl Rahner, right? They read 2 or 3 paragraphs, like totally lost. So instead, they just kind of like buy into I'm going to hate Karl Rahner because he's a Jesuit and because I'm not totally happy with Vatican II or whatever, right?
Right.
I get it. I completely get it. I'm not like a huge fan of Karl Rahner either. I get it, but I think a lot of that isn't deserved. And then now what you have is you just have a lot of prominent Jesuits who kind of they're emblematic of a side of the church that can be unpopular. And what I find, at least in my own personal life, I feel like I get it from both sides, right? So I get the kind of boomer liberal who's like, wait, you don't sound like a Jesuit. I had somebody say this on my channel the other day.
What are you doing? Yeah.
I made a video about why modernism is bad, and somebody left a little comment. They're like, "What's wrong? What do you mean modernism's bad? Are you sure you're a Jesuit?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I get it from that guy, and then I get it from somebody else who's like, well, you must be a modernist because you're a Jesuit. It's like, it's just,
That's usually how you know you're in a good place, though, is when both sides are, that means you're in the means, you're in the virtue, right?
I mean, so just I think if you look at the Jesuits, if you really know what you're talking about, and listen, like I said, I've been a Jesuit for a long time. I think I have a good sense about this. Number one, there are problems that are much worse than anybody knows. It's like, I hate to say that, but like in the church, there are the kind of things that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. It make your skin crawl. There is an ugly side to the church, and when you're in there and you're really watching the sausage getting made, it's bad. It's much worse than anybody thinks. It's also way better than anybody thinks. Like there's also. You probably saw this study maybe a month or so ago about how young priests self-identify, whether they identify as liberal or not liberal and all that stuff. Like the Jesuits track with that. Yeah, the Jesuits track with that. 100% track with that. Like if you look at the generations of the guys who are entering right now, none of them are coming in, self-identifying as very progressive. None of them, they're all men of the church, and they'll say so. Even guys who certainly, if you want, the whole left and right thing isn't exactly accurate, but if we're just going to use those words, even guys that you would say are left of me are saying, yeah, I'm a man of the church. I'm gonna stick with the church. I'm not, I'm not going to, very serious about it. And so that's we look like the diocesan priesthood in terms of all of that kind of stuff.
That's
Now,
good.
some of our more famous Jesuits can give us a reputation. And nobody ever looks at Mitch Pacwa and says,
Right.
Everybody says, oh, Mitch Pacwa, he's somehow he's the exception to the rule. Oh, and Joe Fessio too. He's the exception to the rule. Oh, and Father Spitzer, he's also the exception to the rule. And, the national chaplain for the Focus missionaries is a Jesuit and a very good friend of mine. He's the most awesome Jesuit you'll ever meet. And the Apostleship of Prayer. Oh yeah, that's also the Jesuits. And like before you know it, it's sort of like, oh, it sounds like the Jesuits are all over the place, and we are.
It's there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of. It's a pretty big religious order. You're all over the world, but I gotta say, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. Like, the one thing that no one can deny is that, I mean, you guys kind of evangelized the entire planet almost at one point. You know what I mean? I mean, and that's not that big of an exaggeration. You were everywhere. You were building all the stuff, and like you said, during big crises in the church. So, I mean, honestly, like, the stronger the Jesuits are, the better. There's so many.
Maybe. I mean, again, look, there are bad Jesuits. There are bad Jesuits. So I don't want to imagine that everything we do is good or that nobody has any reason to dislike something the Jesuit did.
Right.
My whole soapbox is just saying, don't judge the Jesuits because you can name 2 or 3. If you can only name 2 or 3 Jesuits and you've never even met them in person, it seems kind of weird to say the Jesuits. You've done it too. I've seen you do it on YouTube before.
I feel bad. The one guy did that comment, and then you're like, I don't know what you mean by this, and I was like, I was just saying I get it. I don't mean it. I actually like I like Jesuits. It is just like this YouTube Catholic trope that like Jesuit equals bad and liberal.
It's a meme. I know it's a meme.
It's totally a meme.
But it's a meme, but it's a meme in the same sense that the whole Spanish Inquisition stuff. Like nobody, when people imagine that the Inquisition or whatever, they don't know anything about the Inquisition, so they just kind of make this show. It's easy, it's shorthand, but it's also counterproductive. I think it's counterproductive. Like there are people who are missing out on Ignatian spirituality. People missing out on a lot of good Jesuits that might be somewhere nearby. People missing out, and not only missing out, but it's kind of disheartening for some. I'm pretty thick-skinned, but some Jesuits get kind of disheartened, and what happens is you have a generation of guys who are having to swim upstream to even join the Jesuits because they're like, are the memes true? Is the internet is what they say on the internet true? And so you might have young guys who are scared to listen to God, who might be calling them to be a Jesuit because people sort of speak in a way that's not helpful, So that's my soapbox.
Well, and there's some of the maybe more popular bad examples. I think people probably often don't ask the question of are they living according to their own rule? Are they to what degree? Are we judging the Jesuits based on maybe their misbehavior, or should we just say maybe that's an individual issue, right? It could be that.
And it's also true too that and I found this, just getting to know so many Jesuits, is that often what the headlines that a Jesuit grabs, you shouldn't judge the Jesuits based on the headlines. And you shouldn't even judge the individual Jesuit who made the headlines because there might be a lot more to that guy. Even some Jesuits that you say, oh, this guy's heroic for whatever reason. And then you I might know the guy and he might be a total drunk. I don't know. There might be all kind of problems behind the scenes. But really, I find the reverse is much more common, that someone is attacking some Jesuit for saying something vague. And I'm like, wait, I know that guy. He's not what he's not what you think. And he's not what that headline says. And he's not, so it's so unfortunate, I guess, when I see Jesuits get beat up. Again, I have pretty thick skin, and I have a great job. I love where I'm at, and I'm happy where I'm at and all that. Nice. But there are some Jesuits who, it's a little hard on them, and it's counterproductive. Yeah. If you are a person who thinks with the church, it's counterproductive to take the largest men's order and say, oh, the whole thing is, I don't know, is bad. Right.
This comment is really funny. It says Drew's over here I have Jesuit friends, I swear.
Some of my best friends are Jesuit. Yeah.
So good. I think another important thing too is you had mentioned earlier. It's and this is something, and this will kind of maybe segue into talking about the internet in general, which I know we wanted to talk about. But there are so many people who are kind of taking on the Jesuit meme or the anti-Jesuit propaganda, you could say. but not realizing that there's like a deeply anti-Catholic Protestant sort of conspiracy theory sentiment to.
Right.
I mean, there's some political cartoons from America in like the early 18th, 19th century or 19th century that are like the Pope is trying to take over the country through the Jesuits, and it's like probably not, bro. But there were so many conspiracy theories, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I was mentioning about like history. You know, like if you want to be on the side of the radical Protestant reformers, if you want to be on the side of the, you know, the power hungry, you know, jealous missionaries who didn't like the Jesuits, you want to be on the side of the slave traders that were you know, kidnapping people from South America. You know, okay, go ahead and hate the Jesuits. You know,
right. Man, yeah, it's sad to see that kind of happen though. I feel like I've been seeing that happen just in general. Like there's more extreme, you know, every religious camp has their crazies, and we, you know, like I've always kind of said, like when I was converting, that like the sedevacantist stream of Catholicism is like our King James only people. Like if you ever had a King James only Protestant interaction, they're like, there's like 8 of them on the whole planet. And you're like, what are you guys doing?
Right. Or some of them are like the Westboro Baptist, you know.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
They're really out there. I mean, some of them, like that's one of the interesting thing about the internet in general is that this anonymity allows a lot of people to have a voice in the first place, right? Because, you know, if they talk this way or interacted with people this way in real life, they either get punched or they certainly wouldn't have a whole lot of friends if they acted this way in person. But also, like, being anonymous means they just don't have to pay the price for saying the crazy things that they say. You know, they can say whatever they want. I don't know how you deal with it. I just basically, I think I'm doing them a favor. I basically just mute a lot of people from the channel that I run, just because I do that a lot. And, you know, I think I'm doing them a favor. I'm like, hey, listen, I bet if you sat down and you really thought about what you just said, you would regret it. So let me go ahead and do you the favor.
You're more charitable than me. I've given people the pin of shame before.
Oh, no, I won't.
You pin the comment because it's like, you said that's bad. No, I've deleted I've had a couple comments that I actually delete and like ban the user because they were like blatantly blasphemous. So that stuff doesn't stand. But then there are some that I just kind of leave because I'm like, this person said this. So, and then usually what happens is like the engagement goes up because then they'll get in an argument with someone closer to our side, but still maybe doing dumb things with their time. And then you get like 100 comment chains. And then it's just like an echo chamber. I just ignore it mostly, but let it kind of happen.
I don't ignore it. I delete it. Well, first of all, because if my original, and maybe this was just a rule I made for myself, but the purpose of my channel originally was to be a place where families who are associated with Jesuit high school would be able to go and kind of catch up on, you know, whatever was happening, homilies wise and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, so my thought was, if I don't want you know, a 15-year-old Jesuit high school student to see that comment that you just wrote, well, then it shouldn't be here.
It shouldn't be there.
And so that's turned out to mean that I delete. I used to have to delete a lot more. So, you know, I remember I did a video on why the Jesuits, what was it? Why the Jesuits have a bad reputation. And that video was the first one I did that really got a lot of attention that was outside of the school. So I did like a Christmas homily a year ago or whatever, and that got some attention, but it was all the families from Jesuit high school. They were passing it around on Facebook or whatever. With this new one I did, and I noticed it was like, it kind of, I mean, for me, it blew up. Relative, I know it's all relative, but for me, it blew up. And I noticed I just had a ton of bad comments. So, man, I'm deleting comments. And I'll tell you, you know what else? And this is weird, and you can maybe tell me what you think about this, but like there's all these weird things you can see in YouTube where you can go and see like what are other videos that people who watch your video look at. And so when I do a 5-minute homily and I look at that, it's all videos like, you know, they're watching Matt Fradd, they're watching, you know, what's his name? Brian Holdsworth. I don't watch Brian Holdsworth a lot, but you know, like clearly we have a similar audience or something like that. And when I do another video that gets a ton of views, like the videos they're watching are terrible. I mean, some of them are like semi-pornographic or whatever. I know YouTube doesn't allow like straight up porn, but like, so I'm like, man, these poor people are struggling between watching, you know, my content about whatever and these girls in bikinis or whatever, you know. It's like I'm just kind of heartbroken over it that there's this internal struggle that manifests itself online, including awful, in the comment section where they're angry and blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, I can see what you're watching. Like, I can see what videos you're looking at. This is bad.
Right? Yeah, it's the that whole side of YouTube as a creator is really interesting because you get to see some of that, and like it does make it interesting because you have a video pop off. And it's like a double-edged sword because, like, if it's catching traction and people are seeing it, you're like, well, maybe they're opening their hearts or whatever. But more often than not, they're just coming in to drop a bomb in the comments and then leave before watching anything. And you can tell, like, I get these comments all the time on some of my more, like, I guess, controversial videos that, like, if they had watched the first 8 minutes of the video, it, like, addressed what they were saying.
Right.
And it's like they just come in and they kind of, like, try to poke you and then leave, which is, it is sad because it's like that person is doing the enemy's work for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if it's someone that's not Christian, it's one thing. You're like, whatever. But when it's like another Christian, you're like, you're the accuser, man. You're being the accuser. That's not a good use of your time. But
and you can tell too, even like the username, sometimes it checks out, sometimes it totally checks out. You put, Drew the Catholic. And so you behave like a Catholic online. There you go.
I get a little racy sometimes. I have been less than perfect in my comment engagement. You could probably find me getting into some arguments, but
I'm sure you can find something like that from me too. But for the most part, we gotta, we have to stand up for what the persona that we put online, and whether that persona is truly accurate or not. I'm sure there are differences in degrees, but sometimes the username will be this disgusting, just right off the bat. I'm trying to get you to know that I'm here to troll you,
Right.
I think that's nothing but harmful,
There's this one. So I had a video where I interviewed a gentleman named Sean who was Mormon and is becoming Catholic. And I get every week I get a new version of the same comment, which is someone that's Protestant coming in and going, oh, well, he left one bad thing and went right to something worse, or out of the frying pan into the fire. And at one point I just started going, you and the other 200 people that said the same thing are pretty clever. But it is just I think it shows like there's something about the way we spend our time online that isn't necessarily healthy if that's what we're doing, where because it's not productive to do that, right? Like to create content, and I guess I don't want this to sound like I'm a content creator just complaining like, oh, they're always just yelling at us without doing the work. But to create content is to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there, to have to think through, especially if you're addressing something controversial, right? Yeah. But to just like walk in anonymously, drop a little insult, and then flee.
Right.
That's
the anti-Catholic stuff. And so like I find the anti-Catholic stuff, there's two versions of it. One is, you're not real Catholic. You're not, just kind of like one or two lines of something that's just real acerbic or whatever. And then there's this other version where it's like, hey, let me tell you about my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the gospel and it's like, and it'll be, 9 or 10 pages all in the comment box, which there are all of these, sort of built-in, they presume so much about what the Catholic Church teaches, and they're wrong about so much of it that it's like, okay, this would take me like 3 days to just to correct you on it, not even to like actually try to convince you that what I'm saying is true, but even just to say, hey, Catholics don't believe that, right? Or whatever. So like, and I feel so sorry for them because somebody took the time to type that up, and so like, I pray for all of these people. I really do. I pray for them all. But it's especially sad, I guess, when I find somebody that I think believes they're doing the work of Jesus by telling, like as if they're the first person ever to tell me that call no man father, it was God, is part of God's plan as revealed in the Bible, or whatever, where I'm like, oh gosh, here we go, and that's whenever I get kind of jealous of these apologists who have all the right answers at their fingertips, and they can just, because I'm going to have to go because I'm like, I don't think I can even tell you what verse called no man father is, but like, I know what the answer is, like, but I'm going to sound dumb if I don't point you to the Bible. So I'm going to have to go and Google it real quick. Well, these things, but like, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to go like Google it and read it. And then I'm going to have to go and like say, well, you see where it also says call no man master, but we say Mr. all the time. And then there's also this other verse. I know it's somewhere. I think it might be where Peter calls somebody father, and then there's Paul refers to himself as a spiritual father. So like, okay, now I've got to do all this work just to help this guy see something he's not going to see, even if I do tell him. So,
right? No, that's exactly right. It's a lot of work. That's why it's like, and this is I've been thinking about this a lot. there's a lot of value, I think, in doing what we're doing, creating content online and reaching people. Because for all the people that are just being missed in the comments, there are like the very slim few who like come in, are open, and then they receive the gospel. Maybe they come into the church or whatever, and that's what we do it for. But at the same time, like I've started to view my entire online life as like a mission field, and the popes are talking a lot about this, from Benedict to Francis, in their World Communications Day addresses, where they call this the digital continent, which is I think Pope Benedict came up with the term, and it's like to realize that just as the Jesuits had to go to continents and really connect with people. And then not just leave them where they found them, but transform them with the gospel and lead them into, the fullness of life in Jesus Christ. And that fundamentally shapes how you interact with that country. Like if you go to Africa on mission, in the 1600s, you're not just going on vacation. You have a very distinct way that you engage with people. And I think that's becoming more and more necessary online, but so many of us just kind of integrated into it without being aware of maybe some of the pitfalls of like what this would do to us.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. It's very insightful. We forget, we act as though our phones are this added on thing that's just like, it's like a tool in my pocket. And it kind of is, but it's also like a portal into a whole other world, And so that whole other world is a place where evangelization ought to happen. It's tough going. It's tough going. We don't have a book on how to do it yet,
No, yeah, we're kind of writing. We're like everyone that's creating content, everyone that's engaging, and we're kind of having to write it as we go. But yeah, I think, and it's like something that's really, I mean, I'd be interested to talk with you about this. Like, I think something that's really been hitting me lately is just that I think everyone is online chronically. So I'm going to set that there's a couple stages, I guess, to my thought. Everyone's like chronically online, which that in and of itself is probably not good. But then the second thing is we think that this is like this gateway to omniscience. Like we think that we have the clearest, and in some ways we do. We have clear connections to information that otherwise we wouldn't have had, and it's easy to access. But I think a lot of times we just think that it's omniscience almost. Like we're like, we can look it up, we can find it. And then to mitigate the difficulty of having to dig deep, we find people that kind of digest it for us, and the algorithm perpetuates that. So now we have this like feigned omniscience in our pockets that we probably consult more than we do God in prayer. And we think it's like speaking wisdom and speaking truth into our lives to such a degree that people become ingrained in these narratives that a lot of times are probably not even close to the full picture, and then it perpetuates because when you click on that video that knows you like that, it just digs you deeper and deeper, and you think you're getting wiser and smarter and have the only clear look at it. But really, we're all just kind of staring into a muddy puddle, We're staring at a black mirror, quite literally. So I've been really thinking about that, and it messes with me. So I don't know what your thoughts on that.
No, that's incredible. That's very, very insightful. I think what you just said is very insightful, especially the idea of the algorithm, right? So, are you familiar with the term egregore? Do you know what an egregore is?
No, but it sounds awesome. It's an awesome word.
So, egregore, like in, I guess this is like in magic and witchcraft and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
An egregore is, and at least that's where you would hear it most often today. An egregore is like a spirit that you create, and then it goes and lives a life of its own, right?
Oh.
So like you manifest, you call up, you conjure up, and create this force, and then that force goes on. And so, like a lot of times, if you place a curse on somebody, you have to create like this egregore and then send them out and all this kind of stuff. And this is not something I'm suggesting anybody does. It's
I was gonna say it sounded awesome. It's super not
but
cool.
It's no, it's not at all.
That's exactly what's going on.
But that's what's going on, right? That's what we've done. We've created, and I think artificial intelligence is the most obvious kind of like thinking that where it's. Okay, to back up a little bit, you have like the algorithms where the algorithm is watching you, and then it's feeding things back to you that it thinks. I mean, I watch one video on somebody restoring a piece of furniture, and then it's like everything is somebody restoring antique furniture. Yeah. Right. And like I kind of could. It's relaxing, and the next thing you know, like, did I just spend 20 minutes watching somebody like with a toothbrush cleaning, something?
20 minutes is like the minimum too. If you're on the vertical content, it's like hours.
Yeah. So like I catch myself doing it. I'm like, what am I doing? If this thing is, is hacking me,
Right.
with people like cleaning the rust off of a gumball machine or whatever. Right.
Right.
And which is totally wholesome content. It's
Mm-hmm.
completely wholesome content.
I was just saying, it can get a
But
lot
it's,
worse than that real fast.
yeah. But I'm here to glorify God as much as I possibly can. And so like, yeah, don't get lost in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to artificial intelligence, where it's not only, I mean, the way artificial intelligence works, and maybe some people can speak to this much better than I can, but
Mm-hmm.
my understanding is that it samples the world, and then, or at least what's available to it through the internet. It samples digital content, and then it finds like what the averages are. It finds patterns. It finds those kind of things, and then can kind of recreate a lot of those same patterns and keep refining those patterns until it comes into focus, and now you have something which appears totally new. So it's Pope Francis playing basketball. It's whatever, it appears like, oh yeah, this looks totally new. It looks like it created something new, but it got that way by like feeding back to us everything it had access to, which is a pretty small window in time of like what their digital content comes from. So when I ask Chat GPT any theological question, it's almost always going to come back with this weird relativistic, hey, lots of people think lots of different things, and this is a, whatever, and it's not that it's wrong, but it's that it's putting on it's meeting me with this created thing that it's drawn from society. But now we have a feedback loop, because now I'm finding myself being informed by this, which was informed by me originally, and it's just feeding it back to me, or my culture, my people, whatever. It's now feeding it back to me in a way that, man, are we going to be stuck in the 2020s forever now? Because you know what I mean? Like, are we going to be
totally.
like when you do like the image thing, the number of images that kind of come back as what looks like video game images. Which I don't play a lot of video. I don't play any video games. Okay. But like it looks like video game imagery, because there's just so much of that content out there that it's feeding you back this CGI looking thing. And I'm like, okay, are we now going to be like stuck in this feedback loop where 100 years from now, we don't realize that we're not growing as a people anymore, because we're letting the machines think for us, and it's been programmed to think by us now, whatever,
Right. Well, I think that's just like a further instantiation of, so I've been trying to armchair philosophy about this type of thing of like, in so many ways. Well, so okay, I'll start with this. There's a pastoral instruction document from the Vatican in like the 90s that I'm obsessed with. One line from it right now. I think it's Aetatis.
What's the document?
Aetatis Novae. It's pastoral instruction on how the church should use media. Here, I'll post it in the comments. I'll email it to you maybe. Okay. Here, I'll post it in the comments right now. But it's there's one line that says, the power of media is such that for many, what the media says is real is real. And basically, not only does it set the stage of what we're taught, like of what to think about the issues, but it also sets the stage of what the issues are, which is actually a way of framing a conversation and controlling what people think about it in and of itself, And all of that.
We just saw this played out.
Yeah,
we totally just saw that played out.
It's pretty hard, huh?
Right?
Yeah.
So here's that one of my favorite things that happened through all of this was, I don't know if you know who Father Mark Goring is.
Yes.
Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
So he's out on retreat,
yes.
right? He's disconnected from the internet. He's out on retreat. He comes out of retreat, and he had a similar experience to what I had. But he comes out of retreat and he sees, oh, there's this document I should read. And so without having spent any time with any of the reporting on it, he just reads the document. And then he goes online. He's like, hey, I just read this document. It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
And his
comments.
His comments, he got ratioed. This guy's got like, I don't know how many thousands of followers, but he got totally ratioed in his comments. And I'm like, this is a good priest, y'all. This is a really good priest. And he read it without the prejudice of having read CNN headlines and having read everybody else's headlines. And so it was like I had a very similar experience to this. So Kyle Whittington texts me and says, hey, Drew the Catholic would like to do a show with you on Fiducia Supplicans. And so I'm like, Oh
What is
yeah,
that?
certainly. I'd be happy to talk about this church document, tick, whatever. Let me see if I can find it. And so I Google it, and boy, all these headlines pop up, and I'm like, oh no, not again, right? Not
That's
again.
not what
Gee
it said.
whiz.
There's no way. Yep.
Yeah. So, and I also noticed that none of those news reports linked me to the document. None of them
Isn't
did.
that funny?
None of them would say,
Convenient.
here's where you can read the actual document.
Mm-hmm.
So I go on Vatican's website and I find it, and I read through it, and I have the Mark Goring effect, right? I mean, I read it, I'm like, holy smokes, when was the last time I saw marriage and all these things said so, so fine and everything about it. And, okay. I do want to admit there are a lot of very influential, high-profile figures in the church who I think personally don't personally feel very convicted about the church's teaching on sexuality. So there's reasons to be worried that those people will have kind of like taken over, right? There's reasons to be worried. I'm on anybody's side who's worried about that, in the sense of like who's on the lookout for it, and they want to make sure that those guys don't get away with murder. Okay. So they're there. They're out there. There's also like a giant cultural force, which is contrary to what the church has always taught about these things.
It's like really popular to be the opposite of what the church teaches.
Right. And I do get the sense that Pope Francis does not want us to first be known as shutting out people and pushing people away and shaking our finger at them and all that. He doesn't want us to first be known for that. I think Pope Francis is totally kosher on these beliefs, but he definitely doesn't want the church to be known first for being this kind of like cruel conscience, in the world or whatever. He wants us to first be known as people who've got their hands out saying, come in, we want you in, we love you, we want you in the church. And then I think he believes that once you're in the church, that's where the transformation happens and all this kind of stuff. Okay. So there's another reason, I guess, to be concerned, or whatever you want to talk about. If you have this great cultural force pushing in this direction, and the Pope is saying, I don't want to resist that force first. I want to seem receptive to everything, and then get you to grow close to Christ and come to. This is the, I'm not saying that this is not how I think. Like, my mind doesn't work that way, but I understand it's something like the story of Zacchaeus, right? And where Jesus says, tonight I'm going to dine in your house. And Zacchaeus has this conversion, right? It's something like that. Again, that's not how my mind works. I want to be careful how I say this. If I were Pope, I would probably do things differently, but I'm not Pope. I'm obedient. And Jesus Christ himself was obedient. I want to be obedient. And so like, I want to be on board with the Pope's vision. I want to be on board with all that. My general personality jives a little bit better with some other popes that we've had, whatever. I love Pope Francis is my point. So you have all these forces. So I'm on the side of people who get nervous and say, gosh, maybe this isn't the right time and place. And in fact, I think I think our culture is totally broken. And so like when you take a broken culture and you say, let's emphasize the synodal way of thinking, right? Where we ask everybody what they think and we get all the input from everybody. And I'm like, but we're broken. Like we need like a harsh leader right now. We need, maybe I'm like baring my soul right now, but like,
No, I feel that way all the time. That's the same sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of me thinks like, I don't want to know what everybody else thinks. I want to know what has been revealed to the church. And I want to be led that way, right? Okay, so it seems like there's the people who are in charge are going in a different direction, and I'm with them. Like I'm only going to be obedient with them. I'm not gonna. I'm going to learn from that, right? Like they're going to soften me up. Maybe they're going to make me a better pastor that way. And if not, it ain't my fault, right? If I'm wrong about that, if actually what the world needs is a harsh mistress or whatever, it ain't going to be God's going to have to hold somebody else responsible. But I just want to be obedient to my superiors, to my, I think that's the right way to be. And I believe in the charism of the papacy. I totally believe in the charism of the church to preserve what is good and true. And so I'm going to do my very best to be a good priest and all that kind of stuff. And knowing that the Pope, and he said it very explicitly in multiple places, that he wants us to, in our own lives, be discerners and figure out the right path forward for the situation we're in. I'll give you a good example. Fiducia supplicans. I don't I think that I would not give out blessings based on my culture and my reality, where it's 99% more likely that a couple, let's say two guys, come up to get blessed.
Mm-hmm.
It's 99% more likely that they want an Instagram picture
Mm-hmm.
rather than an actual what I actually have to
Right.
offer them. So
Right.
I just don't think I'm going to be part of any photo op like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what the document says. the
Mm-hmm.
document says I'm free to not give that blessing, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I've gone on for a long time. Sorry.
No, it's all good stuff. This is why I like having you on, man, because we're on the same page with so many of these things. Like, so when Kyle texted you,
You're our own little echo chamber. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. Come to our echo chamber, everybody. This is the right one. But like that was my interaction too, and that's so like Kyle and I were at the Pneuma space, or not, the Pneuma Catholic co-working space in Steubenville when I was visiting, and someone in Discord, in one of the Discords I'm in, was just like, "Oh, new Vatican document dropped. No link to it, no headlines yet." It was like 20 minutes after it was posted, so you know me, I'm like, "Oh, Vatican website's horrible, but I bet I can find it," and I found it, and I just read it. And Kyle can be my witness. The first like 8 minutes of me reading it, I was like, "This is great! It's so clear, you know." And I did say, I looked at him, I said, "But the one thing that's going to happen," and I said, I called it. I was like, "People are going to go to paragraph 31, see the word couple, and make a huge stink out of this, and not read any other part of the document in its own context." And bingo! Within an hour and a half, we interacted with people who had just seen the headlines and stuff in Discord and online and whatever, and it's exactly what that document Aetatis Novae is talking about. For many, the reality is what the media says it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it says something along the lines, even if that reality is contrary or is like offensive to the gospel, people will just believe it. So for me, it's been this awakening moment of like, man, do we really have to, like, it's so hard to cut through the noise and like take the red pill and go out of the matrix that's been formed to keep you in whatever narrative is convenient. And it's like, how can I even know if I've been doing that accurately, right? Like, what am I trapped by?
I want to also make some room for the people who recognize recognize the bad thing you just said is true. Like, they recognize that there are a lot of people who see that, and so some of their reaction to FS is that it's not that they think the Pope is, you know, a heterodox or a heretic or whatever, but it's that they say, you know, because so many people believe what you just said about the media, believe that the media is the truth, even when it's contrary to, you know, because so many people believe that, I'm reacting to their reaction. I'm not reacting so much to the Pope. When I say that I think this is a terrible document, when I say I think this is awful and needs to be overthrown right away by whoever the next Pope is, God bless him, what I'm saying is I see how many people are led astray by the media. And the Pope didn't take that into account when he wrote this document, or something along those lines. And I'm like, the document was addressed to priests, though, right? The document was addressed to priests. You know? So like, so anyway, I want to make room for I think some very good people who had strong negative reactions. And they are good people and very smart people, right? Who had strong negative reactions. I get it. I hear it. I understand. I guess I'm trying to light some candles here, I guess. I don't know.
It is. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot too. Cause like, so one of the things we've throughout all this, like, there's people that I know personally, and people that I don't know. I just know them online, who have become scandalized to such a degree that they're like seriously considering things like SSPX or sedevacantism even, you know, but or like benevacantism, like, how can we know if this is the Pope? And there's all these confusing things. And this issue, I don't think is actually historically comparable to the thing I'm about to compare it to, but it reminds me of the three popes controversy, in that you had excellent people, some of whom on both sides of which Pope they were following were declared saints afterwards. And they were wrong about who was Pope, but they still were leading lives of holiness. They still were trying to follow the gospel. And maybe they got caught up in the wrong thing a little bit, but ultimately, as long as you're obedient to the church and don't leave the Park of Peter, you're good to go. But I think, like, what I'm starting to discern too, as easy as it is for me to get like all amped up, like, oh, just go read it. At the same time, and this is kind of to your point, I think this is going to be a time where we all need to learn to practice immense charity, because the thing that we think we're right about, that person's wrong about, very well could be the opposite. And like, if it's all unclear and there's so much cloudiness to everything, at some point I am going to be wrong about something. So rather than just assuming, oh, I know I'm on the right side of this issue, history will tell me 200 years from now, and when I'm in, Lord willing, I'm in heaven, I'll know. I'd rather not have been like known as being like a hammer when that person maybe needed something else, which I guess maybe is kind of what the Pope's trying to do. I don't know. It gets hard to to discern.
Here's one of the things, a place where I think the Pope is sticking to his guns. And listen, he's been this way from the first day of his papacy, right? I mean, it's on his coat of arms. If you know where to pay attention, it's on his coat of arms. Is that he wants people to be true discerners in the world, like discerning between both what is good and bad, and then also discerning amongst the goods which of those goods glorifies God the most. Okay, he wants us to never give up that work that we do. And so what's happening here, and this is the fruit of my prayer the last couple of days. So take it for what it's worth, right? Maybe it's terrible take on all this, but what happens is we get in this fight about what is heresy and what isn't quite heresy and all that kind of stuff, when in fact the real ever-present enemy is heteropraxy, right? So it's like a life lived that is not necessarily in contrasted with the words of the theology that we all have to accept, right? The orthodox theology that we have to accept. It's the heteropraxy. We're acting a different way, and in that acting in a different way, we can be comfortable with it because we can say, but I still believe all the right things. I still believe all the true things that the church says about whatever, but I'm going to act a different way. And then eventually what happens is when we finally get fed up with enough of the heteropraxis, we point back to the doctrine and we say, it's a problem with the doctrine. It's not clear enough. It's not strongly worded enough. It's a problem with the doctrine. Like, no, it's a problem with the praxis. The doctrine's fine. The doctrine's fine. It's the praxis. And that to get the living part right is just a lot harder. I can tell you that I assent to every word in Denzinger. I can tell you that I believe every word of the catechism, except for the part about lying. I believe in everything in the catechism, right? It's like the best Jesuit line ever. But I can tell you, I can easily claim to believe everything the church says. But if it doesn't transform me, if it doesn't give me the tools for me to be able to live a life with my feet on the ground, discerning what the best of all possible choices I have to make are, and ultimately growing in union with God, if it's not like it becomes a distraction to keep talking about the doctrine and heresy, and does this qualify as heresy or not? Is this material heresy, whatever? At some point, that is a distraction from the truth, which is heteropraxy is the real enemy. To what's going on. Anyway, there's my take.
No, I think that's spot on. I spend a lot of time thinking about, which is the opposite of doing, but thinking about like, I'm an English and a theology major, so a lot of my thought is like analyzing stuff as a story. And one of the big
Every time I said heteropraxy, should I have said heteropraxis? You probably know better than I do.
I don't know. Words are tools, right?
I thought you were. Okay, go on. I'm
just
sorry.
like twitching over here. No, I'm not a grammar Nazi. I'm more of like the guy who does the writing. I'm not the editor, that's for sure. But
got it.
But like one of the things that really I do a lot is I analyze like what's the story that this lives out. Like we might have the words that we proclaim, but is like the actual movements of our action, the movements of our hearts in line with that story, in line with the gospel? Or is it that we have these convenient pieces of, oh, I believe this and I say that I believe that, so I've done what's fine? Because what you're talking about, right, is like we have the doctrine right, but we're not living it out. Well, what the narrative of that is, what that heteropraxy becomes is if you believe the right things but don't act the right way, your actual narrative of the gospel is it's Gnosticism. I have to say this secret thing to be saved, right? And I mean, take that. It's not like I'm saying everyone's a Gnostic, but in the way that like, it's like a good Jew, they wouldn't have had the whole works righteousness dilemma we have, because what you do demonstrates what you believe. And so it's like, I'm always trying to analyze that myself. I can say I believe these things, but if I'm not actually to the point where I'm doing them, I have some internal transformation to go through, right? And I think that's what all this has been doing for me. I've been going, that's the whole G.K. Chesterton. The problem with the world, sir, is me, because my reaction was garbage, and my comments to all of you are awful. But if I actually believed the gospel, I would be acting very differently and approaching media very differently, and YouTube And maybe that's the silver lining in all this, right? Is like, how can we do stuff in such a way that people turn in, not in a selfish way, but become like introspective and enter a contemplative space with God where they start to actually embody these things really, and really like, let's just be honest, where are our efforts best spent? You know, you spend a lot of time doing what you should be, being a good priest, being at the school. I spend most of my time running my business. That's why my content is like thick and thin. I mean, sometimes I post 8 things and then 1 thing, but have a family, I have a job. We do a lot at our local parish, and that takes, sorry, YouTube, that takes precedence over y'all, even though this is becoming a bigger part of my life as it grows. But like, all of us have these immediate spheres of influence and these immediate things God is calling us to. And when we get hung up in this rat race of like content, you know, sort of like fear, like the term is crass, but the term is like fear porn, right? That's what they're calling it. It's like we're addicted to the fear and the anger that it gives us. And that's like the best way. Exactly. That's the best way for the enemy to take us right out of whatever we're supposed to be doing.
Well, yeah. Who's really discerning the spirits? Who's, you know, who's, again, we want to say, you know, this is where I think St. Ignatius is the saint we all need right now, because what we all want to do is we all want to like duke out in a debate, like in a formal debate, maybe even with a moderator and everything. We want to duke out in a debate style and get to the truth that way. When that would be so much easier if that's what this was all about, but it's not. It's about how we live our lives, how we love one another, how we forgive one another. I can't help but think we're in a bad place, and the hyper focus on these words, you know, the specific words that were used and all this kind of stuff, and you know, and how do we compare that to a document that was written 600 years ago and all this kind of stuff? I think the evil spirit has found a way to make that a grand distraction. That again, let me just repeat. Anybody who thinks I'm wrong on that, I get you too. Like, I get you. I hear you. There's some bad actors in the church. There's a bad culture. There's all kinds of bad things going on. Like, you're not crazy for thinking that there's a problem with some of these things, and you're not crazy for being, you know, having your dukes up about all that. Just don't forget to love as Jesus loved. Just don't forget, you know? Right.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be someone. I'm sort of discerning like my name, I guess, because I'm like, why did I choose the name True the Catholic? It's so lazy and dumb. But it's becoming more clear to me. It's like, that's all I want to be is Catholic, and no bend. I don't want to have any modifier in front of it, you know. But one of the things that I'm really just trying to focus on is, like, you know, like you said, we're so focused on the words, but we're not nearly enough focused on the word becoming flesh in us, right? We're not nearly enough focused on the incarnational movement. At least I'm not. I won't speak for everybody else. But I tend to be a words guy, right? English and theology. So I'm very focused on the words. But am I spending the same amount of time? Yeah. Is that becoming a reality in me? Is the gospel, is the teaching of the church, is the call of God on my life, my vocation becoming lived out? Yeah.
I think a lot of us too want to feel like the church has our back on the issues we care about the most too.
It would be nice. It's good to feel backed up.
So like I was using this as an example for somebody about fiducia supplicans. I said, what if I go to Africa and a Muslim invites me into his house, and I see that he has 2 wives and 6 children, and he feeds me supper, and we have a great conversation, and it's like, man, I feel like this is great, blah, blah, blah. And I get up to leave his house at the end of the evening, and he says, Abuna, bless my family before you go. And I turn to him and I say, hey, may God bless you, protect you from all evil, and bring you to everlasting life. And I bless you in the name of the one true God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Now, I don't know a lot of people who would think I just did a bad thing, but I blessed a family that is an unnatural bond, right? Now, I didn't bless the union, but I blessed the union, which is poly, whatever, but I blessed I think most people are like, yeah, that's fine, because we don't fight. We don't fight with polygamy as much, these days, and maybe it's coming. But right now, polygamy is not our number one enemy. Right now, the number one enemy is a government that has told me that same-sex unions are the same thing as marriage, and I have to buy them insurance. Right at my business, I run a business, and I have to pay for their insurance as if they were the same thing as a married couple. Right, and so that's our real enemy, and that's what we got to dukes up about. But the Pope is the Pope of Africa too. He's the Pope of that place where that Muslim lives. He's the Pope of Germany, he's the Pope of all those different places. And so if the Pope does not immediately give me all the ammunition I need in my day-to-day, culture war, we can't just come out and say he's the worst Pope ever because of that,
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. There's some good comments coming in here.
Sure.
Fragwagon says, I think Father John needs a cheesy priest YouTuber name like the Mossy Oak Jesuit Assassin. I think that's in reference to your sweatshirt.
Yeah. Great, yeah.
I thought that was good. I just wanted to pop that in there. Let's see. I don't know if you know this guy, but Tom says he's a fan.
Oh yeah,
of yours.
Tom is great. I see Tom all over the place, and God bless you, Tom. He comments on all my videos, and he's always a very gracious guy. Love him to death. I pray for him a lot. I think he prays for me too. That's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. David's reminding me that if I didn't take the name Drew the Catholic first, I might have been Drew another Catholic or some other Catholic guy named Drew.
You need the emphatic
the Catholic
article.
Yeah.
The Catholic.
Oh man, I did. This is some fun lore. I tried to start this channel a year earlier than I did, and the original name was going to be the Papist Punk, which is such a cool name, but I backed out of it because I was afraid. I was like, oh, do I really want to commit to like a punk rock vibe for everything? Because I'm not really that punk rock. I'm just kind of edgy sometimes. But there are days when I'm like, that was such a cooler name. I should have gone for it. But it's too late. I don't know if I can switch now. I had to get the bishop's approval to use Catholic in my name. I shouldn't change it after that. The poor guy had to watch my podcast. But
oh my goodness! Well, Father John Brown SJ is about as vanilla as you can get. So
yeah, but hey, they know exactly who they're listening to. Yeah, that's cool.
That's right. Well, they can find me online. I had one guy call my place of work and tell me he didn't like the way that I deleted him from the channel.
No way.
Oh yeah. He kept saying, "I thought you were a Jesuit. I thought you guys were all into transparency." I'm like, transparency? I deleted your comment, man.
Oh man,
I got nothing else for you.
Noah said, "There's no way, David. We need a revival of liturgical clowns, a return to tradition. Bring back the clowns." I think people are getting goofy in the comments. They must know that we're goofy.
Well, good. I'm glad they're having a good time.
At one point, someone did make a joke. I think it's in good. I'm not gonna be able to find it. Where was it? Oh, here it is. Noah said, "This Jesuit sure does know a lot about witchcraft." When you were talking about, I was like, "Hey, oh man."
Yeah, maybe I know more than I should, but okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. I'm trying to think. Let's see if there's any questions for you. There were some questions earlier in the beginning before people started getting funny. My wife asked this. I think this is a good thing to speak to. We talked a little bit about your background as a Jesuit, and she asked, what is the Jesuit formation process like, and what does that look like now that you're a part of the order?
Okay,
so I guess that's two questions. Yeah.
Okay, so it kind of happens in big chunks. The first 2 years we call the novitiate. And in the novitiate, you are a Jesuit novice, and you learn all about Ignatian spirituality. They try to kind of catch up guys who might be lagging behind on like basic catechism stuff. So a lot of guys will, they enter in different places. Some guys are entering in their early 30s, or maybe even later than that. Other guys are entering whenever they're, maybe sometimes fresh out of high school in some cases, right? And so they're the expectation is that you're going to be able to do some ministry right away. So they do everything they can to kind of catch you up on that basic stuff. So it's kind of like a Catholicism boot camp, but also an Ignatian spirituality boot camp as well. They really want you to know that stuff. And so, you do a 30-day silent retreat as a novice. In the first several months that you're a novice, you do a 30 days silent retreat of spiritual exercises. So it's fantastic. I wouldn't trade that moment for the world. And in those first 2 years, a year, not consecutive, but 12 of those months will be that kind of thing. The other 12 of those months of those 2 years are going to be in what they call an experiment. So they throw you into some kind of ministry in most cases where they don't think you're going to be able to, like they think it's going to be more than you can handle on purpose. They want you to be tested. They want you to grow from the experience. They want to see how you react when you're thrown into a really tough situation. Not unlike boot camp, they run you until you drop. It's similar to this with the Jesuits, right? So they send you to places that they think you're going to be a bad fit for on purpose, to be able to test you and all that. So after 2 years of that kind of stuff, you take vows. At that point, you're allowed to say, "Hey, I think I think God is still calling me to the Jesuits after all of this discernment. I believe it's still, and then the Jesuits have the chance to look at you and say, we think you have what it takes to one day be a full-fledged Jesuit. So they allow you to take vows. Now, our vows are perpetual, but also simple. Perpetual meaning, on my part, if I make these vows, they don't run out, they don't expire, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Jesuits at any moment, the Jesuit order at any moment could cut me off and say, we don't like you anymore, go home. They can do it for any reason or no reason at all, right? So,
you came on the wrong podcast, man. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You're gonna be gone next week after. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I'm already past all this stage, right? So they can't throw me out.
Oh, okay.
So yes. So you're at age you're in a kind of a probation for a very long time after that, right? So you'll go off to study philosophy. That period for most guys lasts something like 3 years studying philosophy. And while you're studying philosophy, you're also doing some ministry. So I remember I was teaching RCIA. I was going out trying to lead retreats on the weekends, all that kind of stuff, but still studying philosophy. And a little bit of theology that would make you ready for the next period, which is called regency. Regency is full-time work, right? So you might study a little bit during the summers, but for the most part, you are full-time employed. And for the majority of Jesuits, it is working in a high school or something along those lines, where you're having to teach classes, you're having to do all that, and like basically work like a regular Jesuit, without being a priest. You're still not a priest yet. You're a Jesuit scholastic, they call that. Jesuit scholastic or Jesuit regent during that period. Then you go on to study theology till you get ordained, right? And then that's 3 or 4 years, then you go to work as a regular Jesuit, and you'll do that for, who knows, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And some Jesuits a lot longer before tertianship comes up, your tertianship period. That's where I was mentioning in the past 12 years, I left my current job for a year and then came right back, where you go and live. They call it tertianship because it's like a third year of the novitiate. So you do the 30-day exercises again, and they send you on these experiments again, where they send you to these places where they sent me to Iraq, for example, right? I didn't at the time, I didn't speak any Arabic or anything like that. Now Arabic, alhamdulillah, so they sent me out there to study a little bit of that. And then they put you back to work again, and eventually they invite you to take what are called final vows. So I took perpetual vows, but they were simple, and now I'm fully professed as a Jesuit. And that's the formation process is very, very long because of that. It's the longest, or it's as long as the longest in the Catholic Church, right, for the Jesuits.
That's awesome. There's some other related questions. Alistair Rebello asks, do Jesuits have deacon-only formation?
No. We have those Jesuits. So there's a vocation called the Jesuit brother, which means you want to support the Jesuits in all that we do, but you yourself do not feel called to become an ordained minister. And so you just stay as a Jesuit brother. Jesuits who are scholastics who are working towards the priesthood will go through a transitional diaconate period and then become a priest. But we don't have any permanent deacons.
So let's see, Brother Andrew. Have you interacted with Brother Andrew at all?
Brother Andrew, I don't think
Andrew
so.
Kosmowski.
I don't think so.
He's a Marianist, I believe. Did I get that right? Oh, he's gonna be mad at me if I got that wrong. Anyways, he asked, "What's the best religious joke that you've heard?"
Best one that I know. I mean, I know a whole bunch about like a Franciscan and a Dominican and a Jesuit, walk into a bar kind of thing. All right, so I'll tell you one. There's a golf course. Franciscan, a Dominican, and a Jesuit love to play golf together on Saturdays, and so they go out on a Saturday to play golf. And there's this group in front of them who are acting very strangely. Right? They're all wearing dark sunglasses, and they're kind of moving a little bit odd, and nobody's hitting the ball with the golf club. It's really, really bad. And so they want to play through, but this group is just not, is not letting them do anything. So they go to the clubhouse to complain, and they tell the guy, "Hey, there's these people acting strangely. What's the deal?" And the guy says, "Oh, 3 priests, I thought y'all would love the fact that this is a school for the blind, and I let these kids from this school for the blind come and play golf every now and then. And so I thought y'all would love that. It's an act of charity." Well, immediately the Franciscan says, "This is fantastic. God loves the poor. God loves the lame. God loves the blind. I'm going to write a song about this on my guitar," right? the Dominican says, "Oh, this is wonderful. That even though they are robbed of one of their senses, they can experience God out in nature through their other senses. This is fantastic. I'm going to write a 45-minute homily on this." And the Jesuit says, "Why don't you just make them play at night?" So that's
Oh man,
so,
I love
go.
it, David.
No offense to Franciscans or Dominicans.
No, that's so good. A good religious joke is funny. David asks similarly, what percentage of lawyer jokes do you think will still work if you replace the word lawyer with Jesuit, asking for a friend?
Oh.
David is such a troll in the comments today, dude.
Yeah, I don't know.
Man.
I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, so good. So good. Someone just said, Sea of Grace says, just tuning in, where's Father Brown? Can't see him. I love it.
Uh-oh.
I love it when people play to the camouflage.
Is my camera broken? Oh no, it must be what I'm wearing.
It's the camouflage, man. That's so funny. Trying to dig through there, see if there's any other questions. Not looking like there's a ton. Any last questions? Get them in.
Yeah, somebody was asking. You asked a question earlier about orthodoxy. I feel bad.
Oh
for
yeah,
whoever
someone asked. That was at the
whenever
very
got
top.
to
It should be. Oh yeah, here it is. Could Father Brown explain the key differences between Catholics and Orthodox?
Okay.
That's a whole
This
video
is my.
in and of itself.
This is a whole video in and of itself. So, in a nutshell, the kinds of differences there are, the real differences probably would make no difference to you, right? So, like for a regular person who's trying to get close to God and come to understand who He is and all that kind of stuff, the differences that there are between the two are not substantial in a way, right? So we were exactly the same. We were all one and the same for the first 1,000 years or whatever, right? So there were some breakups here and there. And so you have some groups who much earlier didn't accept certain church councils and all that. But I mean, if I'm talking about just really broadly speaking, the people you think of as Orthodox today and the people you think of as Catholic today are really separated through what they call a schism. Right. So it's not a real apostasy. Nobody's apostatized. Mm-hmm. It's not over some great big heresy that they split up in a way that would be substantial, that you were, if you were to ask a first century Christian, does he recognize Catholics? Does he recognize Orthodox? He'd have a hard time telling you which one was, right and which one was wrong and all that. Mm-hmm. But the kinds of disagreements they had got sharper after the schism. So the church splits and the people begin to sharpen their arguments, so like I haven't read that much of a guy named Gregory Palamas, who is kind of like he's like the Thomas Aquinas for the Orthodox, right? I haven't read that much of him, but he never seemed all that excited to trash, the Catholics very much, right? It seems like the followers of his followers are the ones who really start taking what he says as ammunition to use against the other side. And I would say something similar about the Catholics. Like, I don't think they were doing that polemic kind of theology, right? That they begin doing after the breakup, which is what's so sad. And so we wind up fighting about things that we wind up making differences out of things that for your average person who just wants to do what God wants them to do, they wouldn't make a difference to them, right? If we're talking about processions, inspirations, and all that kind of stuff. And I think the Catholic position is true and right about all those things. But for most people, it's not the kind of thing that ever meant much to them. And in most cases, we're talking about a thing which is essentially ineffable. It's essentially the words we're using to describe these things are not really able to totally grasp it. All we're doing is saying the way that this guy's describing it isn't right, even though I know the way I'm describing it isn't right either, because I know I don't have the words for it. So anyway, we have those kind of separations. Okay. So what it winds up looking like in practice is that the Catholic Church is going to, the Roman Catholic side of the Catholic Church, and it's a lot more than just the Roman Catholics, but the Roman Catholic side just looks a lot more Western. The Orthodox side is going to look a lot more Eastern. And some of my favorite ones are the Byzantine Catholics or the Eastern Catholics, the Syro-Malabar and everybody else. There's like 23 Eastern Catholic churches, because they sort of find themselves as a bridge in between the two. And I find that they have to make reasons why the two should. They have to make reasons why the two make sense, rather than constantly saying, "This is why I'm over here, and that's why you're over there, because you need to be, you deserve to be." They're instead saying, "Oh, I can actually read Gregory Palamas and not find the contradiction that other people find."
Right.
That's a beautiful thing. Like, I like that. I really like that a lot. So in the end, the Catholics are going to be obedient to the Pope, and they believe that whatever happens, whatever troubles that we have, excommunicating the See of Peter is not an option. The Orthodox believe it is an option. And that's if I had to point to one difference between the two, it's not the filioque, it's not the energy essences distinction. It's the fact that the Orthodox believe that excommunicating the Pope of Rome is an option if there are problems, and the Catholics say excommunicating the Pope is not an option.
Right.
That's what I see. I don't know. What do you think of that? It's
no, that's really good. That's that's pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. Like, I really like how you put it too. Like, immediately after the schism, most lay people didn't know there was a schism. Like, there was cross communion for like centuries afterwards.
There were Jesuits who were given permission by some patriarchs in the East to be able to say the Divine Liturgy for the Orthodox, because the Jesuit spirituality clicked so well with the East that they were like, we like the Jesuits. We don't like the Roman Catholics altogether, but we like the Jesuits. So, like, if those things can happen, to me, it's just it's a sin. It's a sin that we're separated. You know, we need to get that figured out fast.
And how, like, what a good witness to the world that would be. Because in a world where everything is dividing faster and faster, you know.
All right, so
it'd be good.
It's kind of a secret, but I mean, I was in Iraq, right, and there were Catholics and Orthodox celebrating liturgies together, right? So, like, when people are coming to chop off Christian heads, all of a sudden these differences don't make
much. A big difference. Yeah. Well, you know what's funny?
You know,
yeah, in terms of ecumenical dialogue, even this is just happening with the way culture's going. Like, I interviewed someone that's he works in ecumenical stuff on behalf of the USCCB, and he was saying this, that the Vatican is turning its attention towards the evangelicals, because a lot of the mainline Protestant denominations are kind of, well, a lot of them are about to become interreligious dialogues because they're changing their formula of baptism. But he said all the people that are really trying to follow Jesus fully are like a lot closer than they realize. And though they're like looking for friends in a world that's looking to tear them up now, you know? So even aside from your direct experience of like persecuted people on the ground, as culture gets more uncomfortable for Christians, unity is almost going to be inevitable. So it's almost like unity through suffering, right? Which just makes sense, you know.
I hope you're right. Here's maybe a reason why you might not be. That's fine. At the very top level of these guys, I'm talking about, like, you know, patriarchs and everything, I can usually read when they're not talking about politics, but when they're talking about religion, I usually find myself saying, I can get what they're saying. I'm kind of on board with what they're saying, and I don't have a big problem with what I'm talking about, like the patriarchs of the Orthodox patriarchs, right? When they're not talking about politics, when they're not talking about church politics, when they're talking about Jesus, when they're talking about theology, I'm nearly always on board with what they're saying, almost always, right? Then you have this next level down where you kind of get, like, depending on where you are. So if you're in a country where everybody's been Orthodox for a long time and there's just a lot more self-confidence in those guys, I usually also can agree with that stuff, right? When you get to some other places where what happens is you just get a lot of, and this is not, I mean, Drew, you're obviously a convert. This is not anything against converts. But there are a lot of converts to Orthodoxy who come with a very anti-Catholic bias.
The Ortho bros.
And a lot of them, I mean, gosh. And this is, listen, hey, I think they actually made a step in the right direction. I'm happy for them for having become Orthodox. I'm ultimately happy, right, that they became Orthodox. They've embraced something better than wherever they were. But they often carry with them a giant misunderstanding about or many, multiple misunderstandings about Catholicism that, like, I mean, there's a couple of guys that are Eastern Orthodox theologians who I love reading what they have to say until they start talking about Catholics, and then I'm like, did you even look that up on Wikipedia for God's sake? It's so clear.
They got it from
and
a
you just-
Jack
and you
Chick tract, yeah.
And you miss the whole thing. And so it's so unfortunate because in the United States, for example, there isn't a very strong Orthodox presence outside of those who have converted to Orthodoxy in terms of what you see online, right? I'm sure there are communities and whatnot that are all fine about all this, but there are a lot of people who just don't know what they're saying, but they're saying it with such zeal, and I love the zeal. I just wish there was also some patience to be able to learn about what it is that what they're saying, because often it's being informed by an anti-Catholic Protestant background, which can be just bad for everything, So
yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't think it's like so close that it's like tomorrow it's just going to be kumbaya and everyone comes into communion with Rome. There is good headway being made, but at the same time there's always challenges, and I don't know that it's practical to hold that like every schism will be resolved. I do think some of the big ones can heal, and I think that the more we all suffer collectively for being Christian of some sort, we'll have to take our friends where we can get them. And then, frankly,
I think that might be true. Yeah, that may be the way to go. You might be right about that. Yeah.
And then when it happens, like frankly, all theology and history aside, the only practical model that would work for a single institution of unified Christians is the Catholic model. So even if you wanted to just be like not going to take a stance, but this is purely practical, the Catholic model of ecclesiology is the only one that could, Orthodox are going to take problem with this, but it's the only one that could really accommodate institutional unity at that big of a level.
And I'll tell you that, and I've heard some very beautiful things said about an obedient spirit, being obedient. And I've heard a lot of Orthodox say, that how much that has enriched their spirituality. And I think that if you can help some of those guys maybe see how, if you apply that to the vicar of Christ in that sense, right? If you apply that to the authority invested in the Pope in the same way that early Christians did. I'm not asking everybody to immediately jump into Vatican I and say it's all perfect, but like I would say that like if when I hear them talk so sincerely about what obedience does for your soul, I'm so on board. I'm like, we're speaking exactly the same language, and that's exactly why I find it possible to believe in the charism that the papacy carries with it to be able to command in a way that a lot of Orthodox would be unlikely to be able to accept on the ground and in everyday things, and so like anyway, I just feel like we you've seen the meme before, right? About like Catholics, they're like, yeah, we're cool with the Orthodox, and the Orthodox are like, no, we're not. So like, there's a lot of truth to that, and it's like such a shame, because I think if you really knew us, if you really understood us, I think there would be a lot more. I think there would be a lot more that mutual feeling, and that things could get better faster.
Now, if some Protestant comes in and dishes on the Virgin Mary, there's some unity pretty quickly between the Catholic and Orthodox to return fire. But
I mean, and I know we all absolutely love the same saints from the first 1,000 years of the church. I mean, my goodness, I read Maximus the Confessor, and I'm just, I feel like my spirit is elevated, and I know we both call him a saint. So how far apart can we really be,
Right. Well, I have one more good one here. There's a couple in here, but I figure we'll kind of get close here if you got time for a couple more.
Sure.
Okay. This is a good one my wife asked. I should have asked this earlier. What are Father John's thoughts on the impact and I would add importance of Catholic education based on his experience, especially in our current culture? That's such a good question, Gina. I should have thought of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll start off with the sad part, the sad truth, right? Is that I think there's been a rush to compete with take our universities, for example, a rush to compete with the secular world for prestige and So that has sort of held us back for all the good that we could do, right? Because I think that Catholicism needs to not just be a subculture; it needs to be a counterculture. It needs to be the kind of culture that we need to be out there making a change in the world, rather than just existing and saying, "Oh, we're just a flavor of people in the world. We're a subculture." I think we need to be a counterculture, and so I would love to see our universities do that, because there's this thread that runs through every subject, right? It's where we get the word what's why we call a university is because there are all the things, right? You can go there to learn all the stuff, and it's all supposed to be integrated. But it seems like, especially with higher education, there's a disintegration of those things. It's like, how can we separate out these different disciplines where they don't need to talk to each other, they don't need to agree, and that's fine. That's a fundamentally modern way of looking at the world, and even postmodern, where even disagreement doesn't seem to bother anybody between these disciplines and all that stuff. And I would go back to kind of the medieval concept of the university, where like you start to see how God is running through all these things in a way that they all match. So what you'll find is that I think that's still definitely alive in a lot of very good Catholic high schools, right? So the one I'm at, for example, is one of those places where when you're studying English, when you're studying chemistry, when you're studying religion, when you're playing football, there's all of these things come together and are integrated in such a way that I think is a huge positive impact on the world, in a way that, like, take for example, a lot of good Catholic schools are rejecting the concept of STEM, right? So STEM, the way that you approach STEM is that you're looking at these things as discrete disciplines that have a definite priority for the hard data sciences and for some of the ways of looking at that world. Whereas if you look at some of the traditional ways, classical ways of studying science at Catholic schools, and it seems like Catholic high schools are like the last ones out there doing it, they have a way of looking at science in a different way that makes the human person feel like I don't just have, the Latin term is ars techne, like I haven't just figured out the technical way of approaching these things, but I've actually figured out a way that makes me liberated, right? A liberal arts education. I feel more free now that I know all those things. So that's why education is so important, because it makes us free, right? It makes us free because we understand the world, and therefore we have a lot more, we have more options and better options for how we can glorify God and how we can, sort of maximize our potential for being the person that God made us to be,
Oh, that is so good. I really like what you said there too, especially like I think today in our world, technology and with technology, but mostly with postmodernism, it's like what you learn in school is just about being useful, as opposed to like being a well-rounded, well-formed, virtuous person. Yeah. So like just be a useful person who can pay your student loans and you're good to go. As opposed to being I get it. But one of the problems too, and this, again, I feel like I'm just bashing higher education. I don't mean to do that, but what happens often in higher education is that these departments, in a rush to be able to make sure that we have the best department, whatever department it is, we have the best department there is out there. Let's say philosophy, right? We have the best philosophy department in the country. Well, man, philosophy is, that's already a thing that might not be able to help make you a millionaire or whatever. So it's already there. But then we'll say, okay, each department can do its own hiring. Each department does, and so they end up making their kind of own mission, and they're not always mission oriented. So they wind up hiring kind of wacky philosophers who are saying crazy things, because the way that you get tenure is you publish. The way that you publish is you say something new. And so if you come up there just talking about basic, I have a friend of mine who was trying to get a PhD, and he wanted to write about the problem of evil. And it was difficult to find a program that would take him because he wanted to write about something that was so way too vanilla. Way too vanilla. The problem of evil, according to Thomas Aquinas, is just too vanilla, So eventually it all worked out. But you tell me, how useful would that be to have somebody, some contemporary today really studying this stuff and really being a voice for this, when everybody really wants to write about, I don't know, you name whatever ideology is du jour, Women's studies class. Yeah. Sorry. But
I would never talk bad about women's studies.
Oh man. I studied English. It was one of my degrees. I'm a nerd, so I had 2 degrees, and one of them was English. And I did my theology degree first. I finished all those classes first. And so then I just kind of injected a lot of that theology and philosophy into how I studied English. But my professors appreciated it because it was like very like formal and rigorous and like philosophical, as opposed to just like everything else we learned was reader response theory. It was all like, how did this make you feel? And I'm like, That's important to gauge, but that's not like the whole meaning of the text. So that's probably why that comment just came out of my mouth, because that was the taste in my mouth, as I was like, everything was just about how we felt, not about what it meant or the broader impact on culture and stuff. But
and look, how you feel matters, right? Ignatius Spirituality, how you feel matters. but we ought to be spending our time. You should be able to judge how you feel as right or wrong. Like, you can feel the wrong way. You can feel, and I don't think that's what your professors meant when they wanted to know how you felt.
No.
I don't think they meant
that was the truth.
They were going
to
judge
that was your
how you
truth.
felt.
Yeah. Oh, well, Father John, it's been so good having you on. I think we're at like an hour 45, man. So that's getting long. I don't want to take too much of your time, but everybody go over to Father John's channel. I have it linked in the description. Make sure you're subscribed. What do you have going on over there? Let people know what you're up to.
Well, I mean, I just put up a new video today where I looked a little bit at Celsus, which is this ancient Greek troll, Christian troll, trolling Christianity, and Origen, who kind of responds to him, and a few things that I think it's like these arguments are they're almost 2,000 years old, some of these arguments, and so I thought I would bring that up just to show you that some of the arguments he's making that sound contemporary are very ancient, and they fell apart for him very quickly because he's arguing as a pagan, as a believer in the pagan gods, and yet he's using the exact same arguments that a lot of atheists today use. And how I found that to be sort of ironic that, he thought Christianity was this ridiculous thing. And yet, because it talks to the human heart, because it addresses issues in the human heart so well, that it's outlasted paganism, right? It has outlasted all those other things, and that we should take note.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to go watch that pretty much right after we're done. I didn't see that one yet because we were traveling all day. Everyone, head over to his channel. Make sure you subscribe. And I mean, I look forward to your videos as often as I make time to watch them, because it always seems like you're preaching at me. Actually, that happens often as well, where I'm like, hey, stop reading my mail. No, I'm just kidding. But I love listening to your homilies, and you have some good videos. So, and it's fun to have you in the YouTube community. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Say that again.
I said it's just fun having you in the YouTube community. I mean, it's just been a pleasure to interact with you and get to know you. So hopefully this is the first of many crossover streams. Maybe we'll be on your channel next time or something. But
all right,
you're getting some people
I've got
saying,
my fingers crossed that one day I'm going to be on one with Dom Dalmaso. So that's my
that's
my real
I love Dom. What a dude. Dom, if you're watching, shout out to you. What a dude.
No, I love him, man.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thank you all for watching and sticking with us and doing all your craziness in the comments. Some of you guys are super funny. Make sure you subscribe to his channel. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to keep up with everything we're doing. I don't have any plans for content. I'll be straight up honest. I need to figure that out. But something probably half-baked will come out in like 2 weeks when I just decide to make a video. So if you want to stick around and see the madness. Actually, Dom Dalmaso and I, speaking of Dom, will be reading Vatican II documents maybe starting this next Monday again. So join us for that, and we'll see you guys next time on Drew the Catholic.